Hi, Magic in the Room listeners. Before we start our episode, I want to let you know about our upcoming Coaching Skills for Leaders certification. This certification teaches key coaching skills and is helpful for anybody who wants to have formal or informal coaching conversations. It's super practical and is actually how I got my start coaching, so I can personally recommend it. The course is taught in a live virtual format, so you can join no matter where you live. Magic in the Room listeners can get $100 off your registration if you use the promo code MAGIC100. Check out the show notes for all the details.
Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hey, Magic in the Room listeners. Today's episode was recorded in the community center in Big Sky, Montana, called The Base. Amazing facility. And partway through our episode, a room next to us got set up. So you might hear voices, you might hear tables moving. It's all good. Hang in there with us. And thanks so much for listening. Hello, and welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Luke Freeman.
And I'm Hannah Broderud. And today we've got a guest who I'm really excited to introduce, David Dexter. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Excited to be here.
Yeah. We are recording today in my hometown of Big Sky, Montana. And David is a business leader and kind of just part of the community here in Big Sky. And I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the past year and would love for you to kind of introduce yourself to our audience a little bit. What's your role here today? What do you do currently? And share with us a little bit of kind of what brought you to where you are today.
All right. Sounds good. Currently, I'm the CEO of a few brands that are vertically integrated to help build a better sustainable envelope in this environment we have here, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, so for listeners that might not know what an envelope is,
Good point.
What is that?
Envelope, in this case, is the exterior of a building.
So what does that include?
Well, for us, basically, it includes roofing, some siding, a lot of waterproofing products, things that deal with the temperature and the elements, keeping us safe and warm and healthy in the inside.
Yeah. And so if you are listening to the podcast and you've never visited Montana, it's kind of a big deal that buildings have a solid envelope when you are in an alpine climate. We're high elevation, pretty harsh winters, a lot of snow.
Yeah, it's truly unique, right? And it pushes the envelope or all these materials we use and helps us really understand the system and its parameters and how we can really help, build these things out so we have the best possible scenario, a long-term product, right? Become sustainable at a point in a harsh environment, which is pretty unique. And it helps us understand things a lot more. And I think our partnerships within those different brands, has given us the knowledge base to really help be impactful in that community. So.
Yeah, well, that's great. So you're a CEO, and in this role, it's the first time you've served as a CEO. You have a lot of business experience. You've had a pretty diverse career as I've been getting to know you. So I'm curious, what are kind of some of those early experiences that maybe shaped your leadership mindset and maybe set you up for being in this role that you're in today?
Yeah. Going all the way back to childhood, I think I had those empowering leaders in my life, grandfather, father, so many people who really took mentorship on and saw community every single day and wanted me to understand the value of community and how we really help out. It's up to us in so many times, so many ways to make that change, to be proactive. I think it's a little cheesy, but my dad always said, we're impactful whether we want to be or not. It's up to us to choose if that's a positive way or a negative way kind of situation. So that was kind of base knowledge. And, you live life It beats you up sometimes, and I think really understanding why those things happen and really looking, inward and saying, hey, I can actually affect these things, right? If I'm paying attention to a point, right? And so you learn what you can and what you can't. And then I really stepped into it, I think, when my brother was ill and ended up passing away. And it was like that introspective moment where, he didn't always have these opportunities. And it really, was like that cause statement for me. It's just like, what am I going to do with this opportunity? And luckily, having some friends and a great passion in fly fishing, as it turns out, pushed me into business situations where, gathered mentors and friends and situations, and was driven to learn things that I just knew I didn't know, but to get to that next step, to be impactful in this thing I love, right?
Yeah.
And probably the greatest lesson that's just reiterated throughout my life has been, turning to those people, those resources, learning maybe to empower them to have that voice that can really make that difference, right?
Yeah, I love that, in empowering your mentors and resources to have a voice into your life, because that's not always a given. As we work as consultants, right, that's one of the reasons working with you and the companies that you lead has been really enjoyable, because you ask for help, you ask for input, you ask for feedback, and we don't always see that, right? I think sometimes leaders are a little bit afraid of, or they may not even be aware that they're putting up a barrier where somebody might be able to see some things and share some truth, but unless you ask for that and openly solicit that and, give people that voice, you're maybe not going to hear it.
Absolutely, right? I think we have this ability to tell ourselves stories and get stuck in these places that aren't necessarily true, right? We forget kind of the fundamentals of things. And ultimately, you look back at human history and we grow through situations, right? And leaning on each other. And our greatest growth, or the greatest stories, I feel, are really where we came together and we asked more of ourselves and we pushed the entire envelope, not to be fun or anything, but you know what I'm saying here?
Pushing the envelope on the exterior envelope.
Oh, that sounds like a
I'm really trying to
brand
stay away from
tagline.
No, it wasn't. I'm turning red. For the listeners, I'm turning red.
Now, what I hear you saying there is so much about agency. Growing up with the gift of someone helping you understand that you had agency for your own learning, your own path, your own journey, and ultimately your own impact on the world. And I know as we work with lots of different companies, oftentimes, especially when we're doing leadership training, that's the thing that we kind of come back to. If there's a portion of the workforce that's having a hard time changing or having a hard time, operating to standards or whatever it is, we dig and we dig and we dig and go under the surface. And eventually it's like, well, these people don't feel like they have agency, whether that's from growing up, without resource or without hope, or whether it's because there's something in the culture that has led them to believe that they don't have control over their own outcomes, over their own destiny. So, I think for listeners hearing to Dave's, story and kind of where he's gone, I just see this foundational belief in you that you are the master of your destiny to some degree and responsible for stewarding your own journey and your own trajectory. I don't know. Does that resonate with you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think at a base level, right, it's like you can do what you can do. And I think that also plays to Hannah's point. Like, there's this place that I simply can't go based on my limitations, unfortunately, right? And working with others to get to that place, I mean, we all have it. And releasing or giving them that agency is usually so empowering for everyone. I think it's scary up front. And, people think that power, you can't necessarily allow that. And when it happens across the entire team. Yeah. And that agency ultimately releases everybody to have these bigger conversations, like things they've held back on that ultimately empower everybody. It's incredible. It's like fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I hear there, it really resonated with me as you were talking about the responsibility to reach out for help. I remember as I was a young leader, someone saying, hey, there's a trend that young leaders want mentors, and they feel like it's the elders or the experienced people's responsibility to take them under their wing. But they said, okay, well, think about someone less mature than you. How uncomfortable is it to reach out and say, can I help you? Can I give you some advice? And I had to admit, for me, even though I was a young leader, sure, like there were people I had more experience than. And I was like, yeah, that does feel really vulnerable for me to say, hey, you need a mentor? You need a...
Yeah. But
it helped me understand I have to be the one that makes it easy for people to give me advice, that makes it easy to get mentoring, that goes to folks and said, hey, I need your wisdom. And whenever you do it, I mean, it's like a dam breaks loose, right? People have the wisdom. They want to share the wisdom, but it's awkward. And sometimes in our culture anyway, it can feel like, oh, what do I think I'm so cool and smart that I want to come give you advice. Like people don't want to feel that way. But when we ask for it, it's a completely different story. So I think you're really a master at that.
I appreciate that. I certainly don't see myself as a master of it. I see, learning through these things and realizing, and my mentors are all around me in every single situation, and really taking the time to listen and digest those things has been, I don't have an Ivy League scholarship or, pardon me, I haven't been through school in that manner, but what I have is wonderful people around me who truly want to make a difference, right? I think we all do.
Yeah.
We all do. It's just asking for it, right?
Now, you may not have gone to an Ivy League school, but you have associated with some pretty cool people. You mentioned mentors and fly fishing. And I remember one of the first times we met you, you told us a cool story about one of my heroes in business, a company that I really admire, Patagonia, and the leader, Yvon Chouinard. Tell us about meeting him.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a glorified story. What went on there is, a big part of fly fishing is getting people out on the water, right? And understanding the environment that goes on around that. So the community around Idaho Falls and all the waterways there had a really impactful and powerful team that's now starting to spread out with the Henry's Fork Foundation. And, they have these meetings and these things where they come together and basically, this idol of mine, at the time was there and sitting on a log, having a conversation with a few people and just kind of being able to be in that scene and be like, this is powerful, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think that's a really good example of heroes these days to me. Like we all, I still wish that I was an astronaut in ways because that was what it was, right? When I was a kid, and we look at who we see as powerful in these ways today, and like the effect of business people like him and so many other people who are taking that charge now is really this growing culture of change and betterment.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about it, to see it in the business place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, not to be political, that's not my intent here, but the point that you're making is in this society we're in right now, the states where this was historically high levels of polarization among our population around a lot of things, there is opportunity to be someone who makes a positive difference in the business world. And, I was just talking to a young person today who said, hey, I'm majoring in political science. I want to go into politics. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what should I do? What should I be thinking about? And I gave him some thoughts, like, hey, I would read this. I would pay attention to chronic anxiety and systems more than I would pay attention to specific policy, interventions. But he walked away and I was just like, he's someone with high ideals like that is not going to have a place. It's going to be really hard for him to have an impact. But someone like you, someone like Hannah and I, and the work that we're trying to do and the rest of our team, I feel like the opportunity for impact is right there. It's just, what impact do we want to have? How bold can we be about it? How aggressive can we be about it? And how clear can we be in our vision to bring other people along? Like, those are really the obstacles. There's not some sort of huge systemic thing that's keeping it from working. It really is just, can we create a vision that people connect with and get the reach that we need to get people to actually make sustainable change? And so, not to just keep rambling here, I mean, I'd love to segue that into, when you think about the long-term impact of the brands that you lead in creating environmentally sustainable envelope systems for buildings, like, what do you see as the highest possible good for those brands? And how do you as a leader keep your team focused on that and stay directionally moving in towards that vision?
Yeah, I mean, great question. A powerful question. When we working with you guys and talking about coaching and that vision, our vision is a very, very large vision. Mm-hmm. We think that, there's some stats out there which are just impactful. Somewhere around 60% of the waste that goes in the landfill is because of construction, right? So
Wow.
Having a direct impact on that, and really where we spend our money and our time is in our homes, right? And so if we're able to offset cost and give a healthier home, what other impacts do we have? And I always reach back to education, right? It's part of my founding principles. If we can educate, we can empower, and then we can go out and do some amazing things. So if we're able to save money and have a healthier place, we can ultimately change the world, really, and what we're doing, the way we're sustaining ourselves. So quite the image, or quite the vision there.
Yeah.
But our goal is to make it healthier, more cost effective, and ultimately more sustainable with that long-term image.
Yeah. When you think about the buyers of what you're providing, what do you think are the major roadblocks to investing in sustainability?
Well, really, it starts with us creating that product, right? Making that product. I think it's an easy sell, right? We're offering a healthier environment at a better cost. But knowing what our systems do and educating everyone around them, making it viable, really, it's a change of culture for the way we do things. And, we don't have to take away from the beauty of these things necessarily, because it's art, it's gorgeous. Some of these buildings we're creating are absolutely stunning. But working with our partners and saying, hey, if we're doing this, what's the value add here? Mm-hmm. And is the cost worth it? Are we really offsetting? And are we building the best products? We've been able to align with a lot of people who believe in legacy. Like, we aren't here just for now. And our impact can be great. So digging into the products that we create, how we create them, the long-term life, and then being able to go out proudly, hold our heads up, and talk to people about them. That's our goal.
Yeah, and I love that, because a lot of what we talk about is branding, and what is our brand purpose and brand promise and brand strategy and all of that good stuff. And what I hear you saying, if I was going to put different words on it, is how strong can our brand be? How clear can we be around who we're for and what we are and what differentiates us from the other choices that builders or buyers or architects have? And that's a different game to play than the efficiency game, mm-hmm. or than the supply chain game.
Yeah.
But how does all of that play together, though? Because I know those are requirements.
Well, they're requirements because we see them as requirements, right? So we've made up all these laws for ourselves that we think we have to follow. But efficiency, you can be efficient doing the wrong thing all day.
Sure.
But what we'd like to be is effective in the way we build these things. We really want to ask ourselves these questions. We want to dissect it at the beginning to make sure we're doing the right thing and continue to follow that, so that we are creating best possible practice. And sure, it goes against what's commonly happening right now, but so many good things, right? We're often our greatest limitation. So moving through that and saying what we're truly set out to do is create the best possible thing we can. Powerful,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
In the sense of it, and knowing that, and truly asking ourselves, like poking holes, 1,000 holes in it before we get there, and then just being like, okay, we got here. Is this what we really wanted? And if it's not, having the courage to go back and change that, because ultimately, to your point, if it's not the difference, if it's not that big change, that big improvement, then, what are we selling anyway? So
Yeah.
it's going to reroute a lot of things, but it all has value.
Yeah, that's interesting that we could make something that's a 7 instead of a 6.5. But why do that when we could make something that's a 10?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love, I'm inspired by so many of these podcasts and constantly learning. And I love how Airbnb did it, and they didn't start with a 5-star review, right? They're like, what's a 10-star review look like?
Right.
And then they kind of worked back and they said, here's what we can do. And if we reimagine the envelope, which we're basically doing every day, we're just like, we're doing this, why? What can we do better? We start to redefine that star scale, every scale.
Yeah.
And what's really, really cool about it also is we go back to a lot of kind of primitive building and things that were done just, for effectiveness, right? With a lack of materials, and they had what was on hand, and their buildings were actually, quite durable and sustained these great things came from the ground often. So,
Yeah. I know I heard one time, this might have been in a national park or something, and someone was talking about all of the log cabins that were there that are, 200 years old. And they said, the only difference between these and modern buildings is that the eaves are actually sticking out far enough to keep the building dry.
right. That's a great.
I was like, oh, well, that kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Right?
it certainly does. Yeah, there's so much to that. And
Yeah.
with the team, around me, especially Andy, speaking of the history of things, or characters like Kevin, the whole community of Big Sky is like really involved. To live here is not maybe the easiest thing. And everyone's worked really hard to be here and have kind of a say in how to build things out and go back to these, these history lessons on why they did things. And it's just a real culture of learning and communication, which is truly important. And the team at CMS too, there's so much individual passion around these different aspects of what we do. You can really turn to anyone and learn something about what we do in a deeper way than I knew moments before. Like, isn't that an amazing situation?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and you mentioned CMS. I don't think we said the name of the main company that you are a leader for, CMS Cornerstone Management Services.
Yeah.
And, as the founder, Andy, that you referenced, has been doing business here in Big Sky for a long time. And some of the characters that you mentioned, they're people that moved and are moving to this area tend to be kind of drawn to that spirit of adventure, of not necessarily knowing the outcomes, but are willing to try and experiment and make things happen. We just had a conversation earlier today here in our community with a group of folks about, that of values, and some of the values that draw the people in Big Sky together are some of those, like exploring, adventuring, experimenting, taking big risks, right?
Absolutely.
And expecting big rewards, but also learning a lot from failure, learning from, obviously, hopefully learning from successes too. But I'd love to hear, as we mentioned, as kind of a new CEO or you've been in this role for a while, but as a first-time CEO, what are some of the lessons that you've learned? Maybe some stumbles. We're all stumbling when we're new at something that you've learned from.
Yeah, I mean, it's a interesting situation. I came into this thinking that I could be most impactful to empower people. That was really the drive. It's something I'd wanted to do for a very long time for that very reason. But then getting into it, actually understanding the intricacies of that, it's not just stepping up and being like, I'm here to lead us all in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Here we go. It's the humility and the understanding of really reaching out to the team and the people and seeing what they need to drive, and taking the time to really build that out. I'm not a patient person by any step, of the imagination, but learning how to give a situation its due course, not for me, but for those who need it, was really heavy, and I still struggle with it daily, and the identity of our team, I think, is something that I kind of took for granted. It's just like, hey guys, we're going to go change the world. Like, that's cool, huh? Everybody really enjoys that thought, but it's like, okay, to somebody, it's changing the world starts here, right? And making it applicable. So we have these wins. I kind of have this indifference to winning daily, reaching for this very long goal that, hurts and has had its course. But people absolutely need that. And I found that I was a poor leader and still struggle with it in giving them those wins, identifying those things and setting them aside and saying, thank you. Like, you were impactful, and that's fantastic. You were your best you, and you really changed us. And, there's so many wins along the way. It's incredible when you're able to stop, right? And there's a big growth in me for that, So.
You lead a team that's, there's a lot of really talented individuals,
Absolutely.
a lot of individuals that are also new in their roles or are maybe doing a role for the first time, who are learning as they go. A lot of people in stretch roles. What are some things that have worked well in building a team of, with some experience in some areas, but where a lot of people don't have a lot of experience in the particular role that they're in? What are some things that worked well? What are some challenges that have come with that?
What I love about it, and kind of the model that we wanted to embrace, is saying at that point the trade that we were really involved in roofing, right? It's a weakness of mine. Andy understands it much better than I do, but he's by no means a master, right? As a partner in leadership there, and empowering the team to do those things and then take that to the next level, right? So they can train out. So that principle worked pretty well and was empowering. What didn't work well was setting up those deliverables in the stretch roll, right? Giving them those wins, saying, here's what we're trying to accomplish. If we get there, let's move to the next step, but let's do it systematically. And it's kind of weird because in my history, I love that systematic approach. But you kind of get caught up in the fire and you're just like, hey, we have 10,000 things to do, right? What is it? Reid Hoffman's, you're building the airplane as you're falling from the plane, right?
Yeah,
or the parachute.
building it as you're flying it, or
And so we're really involved in that mentality, with the look into the future that once we accomplish this, once we prove to ourselves we can do this, we're going to be able to slow it up and everybody's going to be a little bit more comfortable. But A, conveying that message, and then B, setting up those goals and those standards to really stop and be like, here we go. We did it. And we can continue to do it. And here's our next step.
Yeah.
So I love stretch roles. I love the creativity that comes from people who, were put into a role where they have a talent, right? It wasn't just willy-nilly. It's just Paul, for instance, right? Yeah. Paul's been a huge part of our success in coming in, really understanding people, really understanding, parts of the trade, and being able to connect us around this central thing. And it stretched him right in the beginning. But what he's helped create here is something that hasn't been created anywhere else. And it's what helps us move daily. We're fighting the hard battle. To do what we're doing isn't easy.
Yeah.
And so he is a pivotal part of creating that culture that keeps us moving.
Yeah.
My voice cracked at the end. Very embarrassing.
We'll edit that out. Not really. Not really. Keep it in.
Yeah, don't play it.
So what I love about that, and thank you for just kind of your vulnerability and sharing that story, but I think for visionary leaders, that's a really common lesson that many of us have to learn the hard way, is that we might have a vision and we might be really clear on what it looks like 10 years from now, what could happen. But as Lencioni says, when he talks about organizational strategy, he says, okay, well, first you build a team. Okay, great. And then you create clarity. Like, what are your priorities? What's the roadmap? All of that good stuff. And then step number 3, communicate clarity. Step number 4, reinforce clarity. So it really is this, like, getting the vision is just step 1A.
Right.
Yeah.
And after that, there's all of this work to bring along an entire team to say, Yeah, this is what the vision is in detail, and maybe not the vision for 10 years from now in detail, but this is what it really looks like in the next 6 months. And here's how we're going to measure it. And here's how we're going to hold people accountable for their pieces of it. And all of those steps that really are for visionaries, I think the most challenging part of organizational leadership.
Oh, yeah. And without doubt. And Brene Brown says, clarity is kind, right? And I've been constantly trying to figure out what does that actually mean? Like, how can I be more clear, right, in reality? Because I think the three of us sitting here, if you were to look at our, Gallup Strengths report, there would be quite a bit of strategic, futuristic, ideation type of strength, right? So we can, and that's one of the reasons I think we all love to talk, because we can go there and easily leap 10 years into the future and envision what could be, right? And so that's been a challenge for me personally. I always see where I want to go. I don't necessarily always see all the steps to get there. I figure them out. But the challenge for me is always, how do I communicate in a way that I bring people with me and I'm not just like out here and it seems like I'm constantly changing my mind, because to me, it's never as important, like, what are the specific steps that we take? We pivot, we change, but we're always striving towards this goal. People don't necessarily see what's in your head as a leader, right? So the communication around that is so critical when we're building teams.
Yeah, so can we case study that for a second? Because I think a great example is the R&D team that you are building. And I'm curious how that was first received by the wider operational team focused on, pounding nails every day. And how have you integrated kind of future and day-to-day operations?
Yeah, I think, great question and a really cool team. When I initially came to the table with the idea to everyone, it's something that's in my history. I've seen it be very successful. What I haven't done is communicated out how it's going to be successful to a team necessarily up front, and how it helps, individuals and who we are holistically build us out. So at first there was, some what I call mouth breathing, where we were just stopping, kind of staring, trying to gather the momentum of what I'm trying to say here. And, again, luckily I have this fantastic partner who's quite the visionary and sees power in people as well. And so, Andy backed me in it, maybe just with trust in me. And slowly but surely, as this team came from this university and this resource that's close to us, and took what we had kind of seen as this magical voodoo situation and applied science, and true education and understanding behind it.
And could actually prove why it works,
let alone
with real
proving
data.
it, let alone proving it, which is also a good thing to do.
Well, or explain it. I mean, I think the proof was in the evidence of having built, in this particular case, roofs in a particular way that are really conducive to the climate that we're in, right? And I mean, that had been done, and the proof was in the roofs that...
Right. There was that visual, vindication to say, hey, this is actually working, right?
Exactly. So it had been proven in real projects over time, and now there's science and data backing it up why it's working, and also being able to put mathematical equations to it.
Yeah, really start to pick the system apart.
Yeah.
Which ended up kind of being the key with the research and development team. It's the terms we use, right? But they're nerding hard, and this trade work that the team's doing on the other hand. And so often in my history, I've seen those two things collide in a bad way. Like, there's a separation. We were really fortunate with the team we have on all sides to come together and be empowered by it, right? It was just like, we're doing this. Is this right? Why? And they're like, yeah, it is right. And here's what you can do. And, taking that deeper look, right? I mean, you can practice something and think you're doing something in the very best way, but until you get that deeper answer, So we started to really play around with ideas like that. And I think the initial concept of what we were trying to prove out or understand has just grown, exponentially. The questions that we're asking each other, the availability to go up and ask those questions to prove things out. I mean, it's impacted us in safety as far as flying drones. That was, we didn't anticipate that, or the sales and marketing. Now we're having these 3D images and creating this plan set and using, fluid dynamics around this building, which is kind of new. And we're this little teeny company in the middle of nowhere, Montana, right? And they start to feed off each other and the questions that are asked and where we're going. And on one hand, you have these engineers who are just like kind of new to it, but then super excited about what it can do. And then the team's like, whoa, can we do this? And, it's a great place.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Did I even answer your question? Did I just ramble?
No, I think so. And, the thing that stuck out to me is that when we provide the space for innovation, it happens. If we provide the space for it. People are creative by nature and want to try new things and want to create great products and do things really well if we'll give them the space to do it. And yeah, there's a lot of particulars around how do we communicate, what an R&D team does and how do we integrate them and what's the meeting cadence and how do we manage projects that they're working on and how do we drip out the right information to the install team and whatever else. Like, yeah, there's a bunch of those dynamics, but underneath it all, let's just create the space and the opportunity for evolution to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to that efficiency versus effectiveness, right? Like we're able to be effective. We're able to dig and you're out there and these guys are doing hard jobs and, we're at 8,000 feet and they're out there in January putting on a roof or mentoring others to put on roofs and these systems that are very specific, right?
Yeah.
And then you go back and you're able to take that knowledge and exponentially grow it with this team. And it's just incredible. We were good tradesmen before, but now we have some of the greatest guys out there, some of the greatest team members in general, really pushing what we do, what we know, what the industry knows.
Yeah, and just a trend that I see in larger, often publicly traded companies, we see R&D separated and walled off because there's such a drive for efficiency, for shareholder returns on that quarterly cadence, that the rest of the organization just cannot stomach the space and margin that it requires to innovate. And so they're like, okay, we'll take 5% of our revenues and we're going to put it towards R&D, but then they live in some lab somewhere and we evaluate their outputs and integrate what we can. And this is where privately held and businesses like the ones you lead can really just win the day. It's like you can create a whole culture around feedback loops and how fast can those feedback loops go and how quickly can we change our processes to not best practices, but leading practices and innovative practices. And, I think you intuitively grasp that and are leading your team there, month in, month out.
Yeah, I think, in the way I see the world, the lens that I see the world in, oftentimes companies like you spoke of, publicly traded, they get in these crises where they're forced to grow and change these things. And often, they have to come back in. One of my favorite hero stories, as I mentioned earlier, is like what NASA did. And they had all these brilliant, brilliant minds. And they were unable to connect. And we were in the biggest race in our lives, right?
Yeah.
Against another nation to get up into space. And ultimately what they did is they just learned how to share that knowledge and get really excited about what this does. And, it's funny how so many things are really similar once you break down that wall.
Yeah.
And we can all grow and learn off of them. It's the best of us when we do it, is what I see, right? When we're just like, hey, we're in this together. Because again, I don't know what I don't know. And I'm certain that somebody out there knows.
So David, we like to ask our guests about purpose because it's what drives us. It's what drives our organization. And it's part of the thing that we're really interested in exploring, right? As we really believe that when you connect purpose to the work that we do, we get better performance outcomes. So how would you describe your personal purpose, your why? Like, why do you get up in the morning? Why do you care to do this work?
Yeah, great question. My why kind of starts with, again, that lens, seeing that we haven't always been the kindest we can be to ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the world hasn't always evolved, and with all these aspects in mind. And so I hope to empower those people that can make that difference and have that voice, that have often been on the sideline. Mm-hmm. Have a voice and take that stance and do it in an educated way where we can all grow together, right? Like, we're all in this together. Yeah. So how do we get through it?
Yeah. No, that's great. All right, so this has been a really interesting, engaging conversation. As we kind of start to wrap up, I'd love to hear what are maybe some key takeaways from what we talked about today. Luke, what are some things that rose to the surface for you?
Yeah, I'll go back to this idea of agency. And I think hearing Dave's story and looking at the work that he's doing in his organization, it really is, how do we take the most responsibility for our destiny possible, and how do we empower our people to take responsibility for their own personal outcomes and the outcomes of the business. And I don't know, I don't want to boil down all of life to one thing, but I think for leaders listening, really just thinking, do I feel agency? Do I feel responsible for my own outcomes? And does my team feel the responsibility? Have they been given the responsibility? Have they been given the freedom required to feel the responsibility for their own outcomes as they steward their own lives and for our business outcomes?
Dave, what about you? Any kind of other thoughts or observations as we've had this conversation?
I have plenty. I mean, first of all, this experience is very unique. Thank you guys for having me here. But I just kind of, for other people in my role and leading and being new to that, there are plenty of hiccups along the way. It's that determination to wake up every day and help those people around you, right? To truly strive and know that the best leader you are today can only truly grow through those people around you and those experiences. So remember that. It's hard work, but it's one of the greatest things, and I'm so thankful for those people who support me to be here and do these things. So
yeah.
Thank you guys.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being here. I'm grateful to know you and have you as part of our lives and our community here. And I think for me, a big takeaway was that idea of you talked about giving voice, both in your personal purpose, giving voice to the team and to people that may not have had the same opportunities that you've had or that others have had. But also this idea of giving voice to our mentors and our teachers and our coaches. And I'm going to take that back for myself. Like, how can I be more proactive in giving voice for people to speak into my life? I think I sometimes just take it for granted that they'll do it because I'm a pretty direct person and I'll share what I feel needs to be shared, right?
Yeah.
And I think I could do a much better job of asking for input and asking for feedback. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And thank you guys.
So Dave, if people want to find you, how do they find you? How do they find the companies that you work with?
Cornerstone Management Services is on the web, cmsbigsky.com. Probably one of the best places to get a hold of me there. David at cmsbigsky.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and if you want to get a hold of Purpose and Performance Group and learn more about the work that Luke and I do, or if we can help you in any way gain clarity on your purpose, on your values, behavioral commitments, your business strategy, develop leaders, you can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com. And we are on social media. Just follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd love to connect with you. Drop us a note. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Bratteroo, and Luke Freeman, and produced by Ben West. Theme music is by Evan Grimm. title track Fake Love, available on Apple Music. And this podcast was recorded at Storycatcher Studio with video and audio editing and production support by Brad O'Hara and Alicia Crum, with inspiration, strategy and technical support by yours truly, Neil Hughes. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and remember, previous episodes are available at magicintheroom.com.